African Queen, Tubaba.
Have you heard it before?
I've heard it before.
I haven't.
It's,
Who's the artist?
I'll let Amrita, she chose
Okay,
the
who's
song.
the
She can tell us about.
I don't know who the artist is, but I know the reason why I like it.
Why do you like
It's got
it?
the meaning to it. Because I'm from Kenya.
He's from.
Ah, right.
So I thought it'd be a nice, like,
I was going to ask. The choice is obviously
it was
influenced
like,
by.
it was thoughtful. I mean, obviously, I have lots of favorite songs, so it was just like it was just one of them, right? So
So does that connect you to the African queen in you?
well, yeah, I'm a bit of a queen.
You are, I love it. We all need to be queens. We have to be reminded.
Everybody needs to be regal at some point.
Oh, we have to be reminded of our majestic.
Well,
my name is very regal, as you know.
Raja.
Raja.
It's a very nice. Raja means king. Yeah.
I can claim that. So, but this is not about me. This is about you.
Yeah. So like, I mean, it's all about. We haven't started yet. No.
It's been always on.
Okay.
And that's the concept of the show.
Good show, yeah. So no, because it's because I'm from Kenya, so I thought like it's a nice
So it
link.
reminds you of your
childhood, growing up, and it's just so cool. And like I love to dance as well. So when I was younger, I did like I did more classically trained dancing, like ballet and Scottish and Highland dancing.
Scottish.
You imagine an Indian girl growing up in Kenya doing Scottish and Highland and ballet dancing.
Why were you doing Highland?
Because I went to a very British school, right?
Wow.
Like, and so it was very British, and I mean, I was also very I was just always very, I think, rhythmically inclined. I could dance from a young age, and I just loved it. So like the school we had, you would do ballet, Highland, Scottish. I can do the Highland fling, which is such a hard, and like the sword dance as well. So I danced for the Royal Guard when I was younger.
Amazing.
And then obviously the whole vibe. For me, I love like Afrobeat music, and it's just this kind of,
It's such a medley of stuff, all of it woven in together and very colorful.
Different layers coming together.
Yeah, exactly.
Hello and welcome to Forward Moves, hosted by Lina Nahhas and Raja Haddad, a conversation with our guests about the path of their successful journey and what keeps them moving forward in an ever-changing world. Hello, Amrita Sethi. How are you?
Yeah, very good, thanks. How are you guys?
Good.
We are thrilled to have you with us and talk about all the beautiful things you have achieved. For our listeners and viewers, Amrita Sethi is a Kenyan-born British and Indian artist who uses technology with augmented and virtual reality to create new ways to experience art and tell stories through sound. An ex-banker who lived in Kenya, Uganda, Zimbabwe, Switzerland, and the UK, and now in the UAE. Amrita is the creator of the unique art genre Soundbite and pioneered the voice note art, which takes a word and produces the sound waves when spoken loud, turning it into a picture, while she still produces conventional art pieces. We shouldn't forget that.
Yeah.
An ex-banker turned artist following a spiritual exploration into the interconnectedness of the mind and soul and body, complemented by studies in neuro-linguistic programming. Amrita is the first NFT artist in the UAE, and I have it underlined in my notes, producing the world's largest augmented reality NFT mural at the DIFC here in Dubai, and the first augmented reality abaya. This is something. She has won awards such as the Outstanding Artist Award at World Art Dubai and participated in Expo 2020. As someone who has rewritten her story and career path, Amrita wants to inspire others to be able to go inward and find their voice and then come out and either tell their story or rewrite their own story and inspire others to do the same.
Absolutely.
Beautiful.
And as with everything, Amrita, your story, which has been amazing, where did it start?
Wow, I think, I kind of, in a way, it probably started in Kenya, right? When I was growing up, because I was always, we were talking about dancing, I was always kind of very creatively inclined, both in, dance and in art. And my father was an architect with the UN. My mother's a lawyer. as well with the UN. But I was very much influenced by that. And so I was always very good at drawing, and I was very artistically inclined, but also at the same time, I was also very kind of scientifically inclined as well. So I was very good at maths and physics. And so it was this kind of, so I thought, architecture was, exactly. Architecture was kind of perfect. And then for some strange reason, when I was 17, 18, when I started doing my A-levels, I fell in love with economics.
Wow.
It was really weird. I just realized I was really good at economics as well.
It's the first time I hear anybody say I fell in love with economics.
I know, it's so weird. It's so weird. I even won the prize. I was just really, it just came so naturally. And what then ended up happening was I ended up dropping my art. In A levels, you could do 4, but at the time it was just to do 3. And then I kind of then dropped that. And then that's when I went to study, after I went to studied economics. And then I did a master's in development economics, because I found, growing up in Kenya, I felt the economics that I was learning wasn't actually relevant to an African country or my experience.
It wasn't applied.
And so then I went and wanted to do a master's in development economics, and then actually I wanted to go and work in the UN as well, because I was, and actually help empower the poor. But because of all these things, like, having a Kenyan, I was studying in the UK, but I had a British, I was Kenyan passport. There is something called passport privilege, right? I ended up becoming a banker, actually a private banker. Just fell into it. It's so crazy. I started working in Barclays when I was in my straight out of university, and the most weird story ever. And I ended up empowering the rich, not empowering the poor.
The detours of life.
A bit of a departure from the initial plan.
Completely, from there, and just how you. And then I ended up, going into banking. And then that's how, when I say how did it start, is actually I was always very artistically inclined, and I really believed that it just, I think sometimes what's meant for you will always come and find you. And so that's when then touch wood, I had a very successful career in the banking world, from everywhere, from Dubai. I moved to Switzerland, and then I went into the insurance world. But then
there was a moment where, a meeting that happened, an encounter.
Yes.
Right?
And then, so what things that started happening in my life that didn't make any sense. And so, then there was this guru in town. And at the time, I wasn't kind of that kind of person who would go and see a guru. I'd be like, oh my God, this is so pain. What am I doing?
Roll of the eye.
Roll of the eye. This is too, woo-woo for me, right? And I actually went with my husband. And, that day, we went in as 2 people and we left as 2 separate people. And, I know that people say this all the time, and it sounds a cliche, but actually it's what happened. The way I saw the world was just so differently after that day. And it was almost like somebody just switched the light on. So, you're like, we just look like this. And then all of a sudden somebody switched the light and you realize, actually there's so much there that we can't see.
Yeah.
And what I liked about it is because he explained it more from an NLP perspective first. So he's an Indian guru. His name is Manoji, and he looks at, he takes, because it's like both Western and Eastern gurus. And I think a lot of the time the Western gurus have gone to the East, got a lot of the philosophy, and then applied science to it.
Yes.
So to make it more, I would say, digestible. Pragmatic,
so that
right?
X equals I within that world for them, for everybody.
100%, exactly. And so this is that kind of thing, was that I was like, oh my God. And so he explored Western gurus, Eastern gurus, and then that kind of started off my journey. Then you realize that, everything, we are the sum of all of our words, thoughts, and actions. And those eventually become, our, personal reality, which eventually become our personality. And what is the story that we are telling about ourselves? And that in an instant, we can change our story, right? We are the ones who are the ones who are the artists of our lives, right?
We're
we are
writing
the painters.
The script.
We're writing the script.
We're actually co-writing, co-authoring, isn't it?
Exactly, literally minute by minute,
Right.
second by second, and it is frame by frame, and that's when also this concept of the present moment is one that, you know, again, it sounds so cliche, but really understand
it's
it
not, because
is
knowledge,
so deep.
you know, knowledge is change, right? And
Yes.
change is such a trigger to neural activity. Everything,
Completely.
people we meet, every sensation we have, every
Yeah.
new thing we acquire, everything is just a storm that
Yes.
goes into our brain, and that just connects all the cells.
Yeah, like
So-
the synapses, right?
Exactly.
So, you know, there's a very, I really liked Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he
Yeah.
says, you know, atoms
really
that
made
fire
sense of
together,
science.
wire together,
Yeah.
right? And so all of these guys, and that started me off on this amazing journey. I went and, you know, did an NLP course in London. Then I just started to just get more into all of that, you know, listening to all the different gurus. And that's had a significant change. And it wasn't like, okay, I did that, and then the next day I quit my job and became an artist. It was like a couple of years. And then eventually I left the corporate world. I actually wanted to still go into more of the financial services world. So I just wanted to do my own business, but in the financial services. And you know that moment where, and I think a lot of people can relate to this, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've come from the corporate world. It's a rat race. You don't even have time to think. You don't have
Yes.
time to breathe.
Yeah.
You don't even have
You don't have
time to connect.
with yourself.
Yeah.
To connect to
Yeah.
yourself, right? And so I just had, I mean, I wasn't even doing it on purpose. You know, I was just like, I'll, you know, just take a month or two off, or I wasn't even taking a month or two off. I was just relaxing into my life a bit for the first time. And then that's when you go quiet, you connect with myself. And then I literally just drawing. You know, I was at a retreat in India, like you know, it was in Goa. It was on one of these like health retreats or whatever the case is. And I started drawing. Then I was like, oh my God, like my husband is from Switzerland. He's half Indian, half Swiss. And I said his name. I said, you know, the name Anil. And then I started drawing like the sound wave, right?
Oh.
And then, you know, when you press down onto a piece of paper and you go like this,
Yeah.
it started to look like little Maasai men, right? Because it's like, you know, like in the, you know, like the abstract version.
different shapes,
So
yeah.
like a little blob and then like a little
Yeah,
matchstick
like-
almost,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And then I was like, but actually, the Maasai's got nothing really to do with my husband, because he's very Swiss and, you know, he just doesn't, you know, I'm the most Kenyan thing about him in that sense. And then that's when I was like...
I'm the most Kenyan thing about it.
I love how it's all connected.
Yeah, exactly. And then I was just like, oh, but that's where I can match the meaning, the art, you know. So first I do a sound wave, draw a sound wave, and then I draw the images then to match the meaning of the word. And I was like, I don't think anybody's done this, right? So I just, you know, started out thinking, okay, I don't want to be copying anyone. So, and at that time I was obviously still in a very corporate mindset.
Yes.
So I was like, oh, let me
What's the
copyright
USP?
it. Well, let me copyright it. But then, and it was more just like, do I copyright it because I just wanted to also make sure I wasn't copying anyone. And actually I thought it was a pretty cool idea. So I started doing that, and like, again, I was just like, I told, like, you know, my husband's very, very supportive, but at the beginning, you can imagine, he was
there were
like,
some
what
questions.
He was like, what are you doing? He's like, you know, he's like, nobody cares about your art projects. I was like, I care about it. So then I went into stealth mode, and I just kind of did, because you know, whether people do it or not, and I think people will always do it subconsciously, you know, you sometimes you don't need sandbagging in your life. Like, you sometimes just need to also go on a journey and
By
hear
yourself.
your gut.
Just
exactly.
to hear the sounds within you
Yes.
that have been there all along. Most of the time, we just need silence just to be able to hear what's been there all along, and you found that space enough to actually hear it.
Yeah.
And rescript.
And also not have somebody else influencing the script, right?
Yeah.
And so I ended up just doing that, launching it, and just thinking, where's it going to go? And then the concept, then the next thing I know, I show it to one person. I'm at Dubai, and I actually did the first kind of voice generative art without even realizing that's what I was creating.
This is what you were doing,
Yeah, so because like then they were like, oh, could you do something? I was like, you know, people came, there was a screen, and then they would talk into the microphone, and we would capture the shape and sound of their sound wave, and then I would redesign their artwork to match the new shape of, their sound. So I'd make their own voice notes.
Beautiful.
Effectively. And that became very popular. Then the next thing I know, Souk Medinat's calling me saying, do you want to paint? Somebody was like, paint a mural there. Then I painted that mural. Then Expo found out we were going to do these massive like sculptures of a soundbite coming out of the ground.
Right.
And then obviously COVID hit. We're stuck in COVID, and I just started. Remember, I have no tech. I'm not a techie, so I was like, how do you do all of these things?
That's hard to believe now, looking at your current work
Exactly.
and your stewardship in the domain. It's hard to believe that you're not a techie.
Yeah, I've never done any form of.
But how did you? Because what I'm hearing is it's a continuous small movements moving from one phase to another in this flow, which at the beginning, as you said, was unintentional.
Yeah, completely.
How did you come to the connection of art and tech? Because that's an area that is, I think Steve Jobs, who first started saying, the crossroad of liberal arts and technology, right?
Yeah.
But yours is a completely different interpretation of that.
Yeah.
What was the trigger? We heard about the trigger, or probably not trigger is not the right word, but the transition into the role of spirituality.
Yes.
Transition not away from pragmatism, but complementing your pragmatism.
Yeah.
But then there was this other transition of bringing a techie, even if you're now saying that you're not a techie.
Exactly. So I think it was, I always allowed my creativity to drive my curiosity into then saying how I can get what I wanted creatively done. I was not going out of my way to be a techie. I was just like, okay, this is my art. I wanted to do this. Right. How do I go and do that? And because of, again, that pragmatic side of it, I was like, okay, well, let's think, okay, at the time, and I'd never used things like Fiverr and all of this. Remember also, I'm a corporate person. Yeah. And when you're a corporate person, you don't even know about all of these kind of startup vibes, right? Yeah. So I was like, okay, let me just... And so again, my husband would be walking in on me in COVID, and I'd be on my computer, and he's like, who are you talking to? And it's like this random guy from like Romania or like Slovenia or like these random coders. And I'd just be like, and it's like, even I'm like, what am I doing? What am I doing? And then I'd be like, can you do this? And then the algorithm can make it like this? And so I just started getting that. And it was like, oh, then I could realize that tech could do this, and I could do this and that. And then I actually created an algorithm. Ironically, I've not actually done anything formally with that algorithm yet, but I actually created it back in, 2020, where, any word that gets spoken, like voice generative art, and it changes instantly. And at the time, AI wasn't there, right? So I was trying to be like, how can I now add images as well to all of this? So all of this was that. And then I had something, and I thought, I called this friend of mine we'd met at a party, that they were in tech somehow. So I just did a call with him. His name is Jawad Ashraf. And he was like, Amrita, forget your algorithm. I'm going to teach you about NFTs. And I'm like, what are NFTs? Like, what the NFT, right? And so, and because of my background in, a lot of artists, I would say, but now I get a bit more in the artist world, they shy away from things like finances, like the black and white stuff, right? Yeah. Finances, even tech. But because I came from that world,
it was a natural kind of curiosity and transition to
exactly,
that.
like I could understand blockchain. Yeah. I'd already heard about blockchain in my financial kind of thing. And so I was like, actually, that's pretty easy to get. And he was like, well, that's interesting, because I've tried to explain it to 10 other artists and they don't get it, right? And then so that was when it all kind of came together. And so what I'd like to say, and I've actually created, which I've not released yet, this concept of, I feel like I've gone from a black and white world, like, into a colorful
mosaic dot. Oh, I like that.
So like this, and that dot for me is a representative of just the present moment, right? Because actually all our life is just frame by frame. And if you take that frame and you make it into a dot, and a dot that dances, a colorful dot that dances, rather
it's
than
so
this.
beautiful how you're saying that, because you've brought in all that. What's happened is that all elements of you have come together in that one single dot. You know, you have the banker, the who knows that whole world, married into your young artist, married into, you know, the technology that you understand. You know, all of it together.
And the spiritual aspect
The
that
spiritual
wasn't there, but that found its natural
that
place.
wove its way into that one little moment, one little dot that contains an infinite amount of storytelling there that you've had. So it's quite. We're always really fascinated with each person's story. How, you know, there's always a thread, and that thread is always in retrospect an orchestration that none of us could have scripted on our own or preconceived.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is one more example of that, and it's absolutely stunning.
Absolutely.
The final work is always in motion, perpetual motion, but it's always very touching to us when we listen to it.
No, thank you. I really appreciate it. But for me, I also, like, I always say that actually now, if someone asks me, I'm like, I am about art, tech, health, and wealth.
You mentioned Jawad, and I have a question from Jawad.
Yeah.
So, Amrita, at the beginning of your journey, I remember the thing that you found quite nerve-wracking was how to establish yourself in a space that was so new.
Yeah.
And really, what were the challenges you found before, right at the beginning of your journey, in terms of trying to figure out how you were going to get out there to the public?
Yeah.
Because there were many people saying that they could show you crypto, show you the market, explain about NFTs, take you to exhibitions, but ultimately you were the talent. How did you decide to move forward, and what choices made you as successful as you are now in the region?
Oh, he's very good, Jawad. He's excellent.
So, dear
He's been
Amrita,
such a mentor to me as well. So he's a nice question.
what choices did you make, and how did you decide to move forward? I think everybody would like to hear that. Not only Jawad. And this is where we have the cut. You know,
This is the moment of
transition
silence where all,
logo.
like, the needle is about to
So again, and it's funny because normally I tell the story and I kind of stop here, but actually then it goes into, as he knows, then it gets into the nitty gritty of actually and the ups and downs that I went through. I think what happened was, and what he's especially referring to is, I can feel it, is that as soon as I started getting into it, well, when I first got into it and I started doing it, obviously nobody understood what was happening, like nobody. And I was, I remember I even gave for the first talk, I didn't even call it NFTs, I was calling it digital art. And I was slightly amused by the whole thing as well. Like, you know, I was selling. I remember I was on a trip to Kenya and like was on a boat and like I got a ping on my phone saying, you know, artwork sold for $10,000. Like I was like, what? I was like, what? And I was like, anyway, guys, let's celebrate. Party's on me today, right? Like, you know, it was almost like I just thought this was not even thingy. And then it was into 2021 when, you know, Beeple's artwork got sold for like $69 million. Then all of a sudden that push notification went to everybody, right? And then, you know, people came out of the woodwork to be like, okay, Amrita's been banging on about this for like the last year. And then I think from that, as that kind of momentum started growing around me and it started getting quite hot, it was a bit like, it started attracting, I would say, some more unsavory characters who were trying to then, you know, take advantage, I would say, of me. And I was like, okay, you had this whole big crypto world, and you know, how am I? So not only I've never been an artist before, right? And I've never gone into this crypto world. So there are two big worlds, and two unknowns, right? And the first one I'll talk a bit with the art side, because you know I'm no expert in the art world. Like, it's not even something that I'd overly studied. Yes, when I was working in Zurich Insurance, I was doing art insurance, so I understood. Yes, there was
from that aspect.
that aspect. and I was connected to the galleries, and I was always still very connected to it. But it felt very much with the Web 2. When I say Web 2, it's like the traditional. It's the state of the current world today is Web 2 for me. So, or the traditional art market, and you don't need to know that much about the art market to know it's quite gatekeeped, right?
Of
and
course,
it's like. And they're kind of a little bit critical of artists that are self-made, that are self-taught.
They're wary of any change.
Yeah,
that kind of challenges the
it's still a traditional
existing. And that's happened, and you have to kind of know their rules. And I didn't obviously know their rules, and I wasn't going out of my way to know their rules either, right? So that kind of felt like I tried to. And then but I was getting a bit of a, not the most nicest response, like good vibe. But then, I was like, but then I got this crypto world, which was really pulling me in. And one thing I've learned over time is, again, it sounds cliche, don't, chase, attract. And I felt the minute I feel in my life, now I'm beginning to hone into it more, is the minute I feel like I'm chasing something.
Right.
It's just not right for me.
Right.
If I'm attracting something, and that's kind of the flow is easier. Why, and sometimes we as human beings, we get so, I'm kind of an achiever. I'd like to say, I'd like to achieve things. Like I like it when I do something. And so sometimes if you have that personality type, you want to, like, if something's a challenge, so if you feel like you feel like you want to, like, overcome it
and
to prove
it.
that you can do it.
Yes.
And what I've realized sometimes is that actually sometimes that's just not your time.
So how do you it's a fine line, isn't it, between understanding that you are attached.
Yes.
Like there's the attachment piece of the spiritual world where it becomes like this is when you're chasing. But when how do you know the fine line between you're actually following a path that you're scripted or post-scripted that is the right way to go? What tools do you implement for yourself?
I think it becomes an awareness piece, right? So you start to be like, okay, this has happened once. If it happens 2 or 3 times, okay, this is not, if things are not falling into place and you're feeling, but it's taken me, I would say 5-6 years to hone that skill.
That's what I wanted to ask you.
And then it's like, but if this is happening and that is opening and all of a sudden that person keeps popping up in your life, or you randomly bump into them and you're like these coincidences and you're like, that just seems so easy, right? This is just flowing for me. Whereas every time I try and talk to that person or thing it just isn't feeling
so you're still
right.
Even in that, and you're moving forward, as Jawad was asking, and as a tool, you're still listening to those voices. You're constantly having to see the algorithms of that.
Yes.
What is the motion of that? What is the flow of that? Rather than stick to a thing.
And exactly, and also learning to try to, very important also, attract the right people, like, who are really great intentions for you. And then you start to look and be like, that person was like genuinely really helpful. Like somebody like Jawad, for example, or, there's been so many people that, you start to think and you really realize these guys have good intention towards you, but then it's also equally who don't have good intentions. So again, so that was the art world. So then going into the crypto world, while it was flowing like this, then you start to have, and then I start getting attention. So you have these honeybees that come around. Yes. And then there were a couple of people who tried to, at the beginning, say, oh, I can introduce you to this world. But I want already, like at the beginning, he saw a lot of potential. Proposal. He's like, I want 20% of everything you're going to make for the future.
Yeah.
And I was like, the first time, I was like quite excited because he was talking like this and that. And then I remember actually asking Jawad to go and have a chat with and help me have it, like discern that. And he was at the time, as having guided voices like that, be like, Amrita, you don't need that person.
Yes.
You can do this yourself.
You know what,
So
I hear that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry, I hear that, and I go back to when you were drawing the waves, and you said, okay, how can I translate a noun into a sound?
Yeah.
But what I hear, what you just said, and what you said earlier, because there are so many sounds around, you have to make sense and connect with those who make sense. It's like it's a reverse process of how do I transfer the sound wave into nouns or into actually, you know,
Yeah.
something that means something.
Plus, there's your inner voice
So
as
true.
well as the voices of others. It's both of them
I
at the
didn't even
same
say
time.
It's that, it's that expression.
Right.
Because there's a difference between
Yeah.
noise. I keep
No,
interrupting
no,
you,
good,
Lina.
please. No, I'd
Yeah.
rather you.
This,
Yeah.
the difference between noise and
Yeah.
sounds that make sense. That noise is all around us.
Yeah.
But only sound
like that.
can really make sense.
It's
Yeah.
and you tune into
You
it,
tune into
and you flow with
Yeah.
it, and it's so funny because you can't see, but my next collection that I'm doing is all based on
Movement.
that.
Well,
So
that
we're gonna
goes
talk
back
about that.
to
Yeah.
yeah. Well, that
Yeah.
I mean, it's beautiful because it's sound bites, but you're
Yeah.
selecting them, and it's like honing into who's you, who isn't, who's on the path of moving it forward, and who isn't, and that
Yes.
just comes in when you're present.
Yeah.
And movement, because you started with movement. You started with your
Scottish dance.
Scottish
Yeah.
dance, your ballet, so it's all coming, finding its way
Completely.
together into this piece of
Yes.
what you're creating.
I have another question, which is
Yeah.
probably
Yeah.
will be a good segue to
Yeah.
what's happening next. I'm sure you will recognize this this sound.
Yeah.
Another question I was thinking maybe, how do you as an artist see the future? How will it evolve in terms of kind of a combination between art and tech? How will art and tech combine itself going forward?
So
Yeah.
who's this?
So that's my husband.
That's Anil. That's
My
Anil,
lovely
and
husband.
I'm interested. I was interested in his
Yeah.
questions. That how do you see the future?
Yeah.
I mean, we already touched upon the combination or the harmony between art and tech. How do you see that future? And is your next collection an interpretation or one of the interpretation
Yeah.
of this future that you see?
Yeah, completely. You're right. It's a great segue into it. So I think, when you're saying about the flow of a sound and dance and movement, and so I have my sound bites, which are all voice note art, which I then call sound bites, where I'm turning words into, art. And now I'm going to be creating soundscapes, where I'm turning sound or music and dance into art,
Wow.
but into an abstract art. And I'm moving away from the lines, and I'm moving more as a flow because of that present moment, that dot. And so
Beautiful.
the only thing that exists what are the things that exist brings us to the present moment is breath. So breathing in and out. When we're dancing, music is an example. It's like it exists only in the present moment, and dancing and music, right? And like art. And so what I'm doing is I've created like a system where you actually, when the music is playing, it creates the art.
Right.
And then you can actually link it with cameras, and it captures the movement, and then that actually creates art within that same piece. And bringing then in this kind of spirituality is that, or even this concept of stuff that I've learned on my spiritual journey, is we think that the past is here and we think the future is here. We think it on a linear
In
timeline.
linear terms.
But actually what happens is that minute the dot happens, that fades away. The past literally fades away. And the future can literally go anywhere, right? It's where is your dot going? And so in a way, my art ends up looking like scribbles. It's just scribbles. And when you look at it, you're like, it's just scribbles on a page. But actually, for me, that's the essence of the present moment. And you'll be able to even take a snapshot of it and capture. It's like an art selfie. And like
Yes.
in that moment,
Oh, that's beautiful.
you've got that kind of,
Right.
present moment. And so I think then, to answer the question of where do I feel, is that for me, what I do with my art, full stop, is how I use tech. Is tech is going to completely transform the way we experience and express ourselves creatively, because all of a sudden, like, tech has improved everything in our lives. It's literally taken everything to our lives to a whole different level. And yet, for some reason, in the art world, maybe because of these gatekeepers who are uncomfortable with change, it's the one thing that's not really changed too much. Like we still have, for me, that's pretty old school, right? Like it's just a surface, right? But now imagine, I pick up my phone, you have tech that then tells another story. So we're basically unlocking a digital dimension, a new kind of canvas. Because actually, and this is, if you link it back to spirituality in some way, is there's so much that we cannot see. But just because we cannot see it, it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Yeah. And so, like, how can we then use this space around us to even tell more of a story? And
it feels like you're like the scribble. It's the endless potential of one moment. There's always the potential within a future is endless and infinite, and you're capturing that. You're capturing the different potentialities that are possible to even bring a voice or a picture.
And the associated flow of that. And what I've noticed, I'm my wife accuses me that I'm not a good people observer, but she's a psychologist, so what do I know? Right? But I've noticed something. When you started talking about your next project, the whole narrative became so rhythmic. Your hands were weaving. And then when you gave the example of conventional art, you automatically used square lines, and then you jumped again to talk about the non-linear expression of what you were aiming to do. Again, that rhythmic movement of the hands. And it reminds me, Lina, when you go into when you get into the topic,
when I get into my zone of movement,
your hands start moving. So I saw a connection there with the hand movements.
We're all energy.
But the irony in the challenge you so well described today is that art has only evolved to where we are today because of tech challenges, and tech varies through the ages, right? I mean, so brush strokes, different paints, different canvases, different all these were in their own times technological challenges that were advancement, and I mean challenges from the eye of those who were holding the traditional art of that time, right?
But opened up
and this is what we are experiencing today. And there's a big misunderstanding of the role of tech in within the art world, because of the gatekeepers, because of the lack of curiosity. You mentioned earlier that at the basis of creativity is curiosity, and I can expand on that into like the current state of the world, but we don't have the time for that at the moment. But it can give a different dimension if we just allow it, if we're curious enough.
I think people don't like change.
Pioneers are always lonely at the beginning.
Yes.
It's always the case. When you're a pioneer, because there's resistance to change and lack of understanding, pioneers are always lonely until the world catches up.
But I also realize, like, I'm also becoming an educator, right? Because it's like, people don't like change, full stop, right? Some people are more privy to change than others, but overall,
other comfort.
It takes them. And I think, so even this world of what I call is bridging the gap between the Web 2 and the Web 3. So when it was very interesting at the beginning when you said she also does physical art, it's almost like I have to reinstate that now, because I'm like, I create physical art. It's a physical art with digital experiences where I use tech to enhance your creativity.
I knew I will trigger that when I put it in that, and I put it on purpose there because I knew I did it.
Exactly.
And I was looking for that. It took us 41 minutes to get to that reaction.
But it's exactly because otherwise, like now, if I don't say I do physical art, then people are like, oh, NFT, digital. I sometimes even choose not to say NFTs but you're still having to educate people. So even for somebody to be able to experience your art, I need to educate them on how to experience the art. So
let me just reiterate the disclaimer. Amrita is not a techie.
Yeah.
She's just curious.
Yeah,
That's
just a curious techie.
Bucket monsters.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So
I'm curious. I mean, I'm lying because I saw bucket monsters, or at least some of them. But I'm sure that Lina is curious.
I'd like to. I also read a little bit, but I would like to hear it from you.
Yeah, I mean, so bucket. Okay, so you have this, as we're saying, like I would say my art style, which is sound bites, and now it will be soundscapes. And I see this as really as like my art. No, not my art, but like, yeah, like as an, yeah, even Bucket Monsters is my art, but in a way that's more my,
shall we say signature, or we don't like that word?
I love that word.
Yeah.
Perfect. So my signature style of art is around sound, and now I'm adding dance and movement, and always incorporating this concept of, change and storytelling in that. Bucket Monsters is my collectible collection. And it does quite a lot of things in the sense that even before getting into it, it reflects of what is happening in the NFT world. So the NFT world is about these collectible concepts. It speaks to, I would say, still the traditional Web 2 world of people who understand, who have collected collectibles. And at the same time, it's something that bridges the gap between Web 2 and Web 3. And it's like a nice way for people to start. The Web 2 world understands collectibles. So by understanding that, then when I say to them, okay, Web 3 NFTs, this is how it's now being transformed in how it's going to be for the future, then it's easier for people to understand that. And then I wanted to also create some, and I actually got this idea. I go on these creative retreats, and the creative and spiritual retreats. And that's where I now make time and space from my lesson before to listen to myself. Because again, even now I'm an artist, but you get very busy in your life. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to carve out this time for me to then connect to my conscious and my subconscious mind.
Your own sound.
Your
my
own
own
voices.
sound.
Yeah, your own sounds.
I love that. So yeah, and then when I went on one creative retreat, there was, I had a dream, and there was like a bucket, right? And so, like a lot of the time, if you're not feeling well, you have a bucket, and if you like, make a mess in the bucket. So they're like, you have to take your bucket everywhere because, you might, you're gonna make if you make a mess, then you
better
right
have a
there,
bucket with you, yeah.
Right? So your bucket's your best friend. So I was like, yeah, okay, my bucket's my best friend. And like a bucket, it's like we have bucket handbags.
So
I'm walking around with my bucket handbag.
Can I choose a sexier friend than this?
I was like walking around with my bucket's my best friend, making it styly. And then I'm just like, okay, my bucket's my best friend. I'm like, okay, who's my best friend? My husband, Anil. So I'm starting to talk to the bucket because it's my best friend. And now I'm getting a little bit angry because the bucket's not talking back. I'm like, bucket, why are you not talking back? But it's because it's a bucket. And that's kind of the first lesson, is that in life, sometimes even with our most loved ones, we think we're getting through to them, but we might as well be talking to a bucket. So you have to change the way you communicate in order to get through to someone.
So true.
And then I make a mess in the bucket because I get angry and because obviously I'm now annoyed. And I'm then going, okay, well, that represents like a fight between me and my husband. And I'm like, okay, husband, we've made this mess in this bucket. Can you come and help me clean it up? Because it's both of our mess. It's not just my mess. And then it's just like, I'm laughing. My husband's like far away. He's in another country. How's he? Well, he's not around. Like, why,
he doesn't even know it's a bucket.
He doesn't even know it's a bucket, but it's my mess.
Yeah.
So even when you two people argue, you think you're making a mess in a communal bucket, but actually I'm making a mess in my bucket and you're making a mess in your bucket. And actually it's my job to clean my bucket. And so I then have this whole thing of, we then start to get comfortable with our messes, right? And we're like, oh, it's just a little bit of a mess. I'll go clear up later. It starts to get messier, but then you're like, oh, it's now too messy for me to even clean it up. I can't even go in. But actually, sometimes you've just got to take that bucket, get like some nice, cherry and vanilla shower gel or, whatever.
That's very
put it
specific.
in. It is very specific for a specific reason. And then you put like, all these bubbles come up. And actually, it's very cathartic because the minute you put soap and water into a bucket, what happens? The bubbles come, and it's nice to have a cherry scented or whatever watermelon scented one, that you then don't actually see the mess when you throw it out. And that for me reflects your personal growth and your personal journey, is that in life, we all make mistakes. we're all making messes on a daily basis. It's not happening. Like, even if you're like, you know, you mess up here, you mess up there, and you're like, oh, and that's totally fine. But what happens in life is that we keep making messes, and then we don't go and clean ourselves. We don't go on our spiritual journey to understand our personal growth, right? And so, you know, then, but when you clean your bucket, how nice is that? You have a nice clean bucket, right? And you don't need to throw away, because what people do is they try to throw away their old buckets and they get another bucket and make a mess again.
Yeah.
And this can then be relate to so many aspects of life. It can be related to relationships. If you don't clean your bucket, if you just throw away your bucket and get a new relationship and you get a partner,
You're
whatever,
it's
going to have the same thing.
Yeah.
So you're going to have
you remain static. You don't move.
You don't move. But I know it's hard. And some people think, oh, to do the work, to do personal growth, to get in to heal my trauma, that's messy. It's going to feel, but actually it's going to be a bit unpleasant. It's like going to the gym.
And
but the long-term benefits are great.
What's beautiful, what I'm hearing in your story is an analogy to art, coming back to creative. Well, life is art, isn't it? Is the fact that it's the actual mistakes, so-called mistakes, the actual purging mess in the bucket is what allowed you to create the cherry vanilla. It allowed you to create, it allowed you to clean. It's the act of cleaning is the creative act itself. Without it, we might as well not have, I mean, thank God for that, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. Exactly. So there's like a wisdom in these buckets showing up.
And I actually
and cleaning them, because that's the act of creation that you're doing. You're composing that. Yeah.
100%. And so this is why when I have these so I get these moments, and like even with the present moment, it's how do I take these learnings that I have understood, and I feel as my gift as an artist to everybody else is that once you then clean your bucket, you have to go and help other people clean their buckets, because there's no point you being a clean bucket and everybody being a messy bucket, because you'll eventually just get messy. And you don't, as a clean bucket, you don't want to be with messy buckets. And so again, this happens in marriages. If imagine one person is cleaning their bucket, the other one is messy, whatever, or when you're dating somebody, you've got two when you say that person, you're just attracting toxic people. Well, because maybe you just need to look at your own bucket first. Because a messy person won't attract a clean bucket.
True.
Right.
It's like so my gift for me, I feel as an artist, is to be able to take something that I've learned that I feel is a universal feeling and can help others, come out and tell my story and help others. And so I really challenged myself to be like, how can I create an art piece or a collectible that just explained that whole story. And so that's why I have like my little bucket monsters.
Right. Okay.
So that you have and you're a little monster coming out the bucket, and it does a couple of things. It shows that we're all, and so you have different traits to the bucket monster. Like think of a cartoon character. It looks like a cartoon character. Okay. It's actually on my back at the moment. So like you have a cartoon character, and then just like human beings, we have all the same shape, but our eyes, nose, mouth, everything, our traits make us uniquely different. So I have then created lots of different traits. Then using tech and algorithm, I'm able to pull all those traits together that then make millions of bucket monsters.
Right.
Like I'm making a human being,
again,
right?
Different dimensions.
It's like, and then so we're all uniquely different. And then the idea is that it flips. We talk about the bucket list. We all know what a bucket list is. You put your experiences in a bucket. But actually, it's for me, I'm extending that concept that we're not just our words, thoughts, actions, and experiences is what goes into our bucket. It's not just our experiences. So then we are the bucket. So are you a happy bucket? Are you a sad bucket? Right. Are you a toxic bucket? A little bit messy bucket.
Seems like that bucket is a very, very strong self-reflective bucket.
Exactly. And actually, when you say your bucket is your best friend, who's actually your best friend?
Yourself. So the bucket is really like the mirror, if you like, the mirror.
100%.
Right.
And again, these are all amazing concepts, but I've just gone and put it into a thing that hopefully kids can understand,
Right.
but adults can relate to it as well.
You know, I hear your frustration because, like I said at the beginning, being a pioneer is always a lonely place because you're trying so bad to explain your concept in the future, which is what we started with as a question. And you're trying to find the most simplistic of ways when it is very, very, it's multitudinal. Like it's quite a few things in there. You have spirituality, you have, the tech, you have your personal story, you have the story of serving the community at the same time. There's so much to pass on, and you're looking at it from many different angles, and I think that's the creative's mind. So thank you for that.
Thank you
for bringing in the science, the creativity, the spirituality, the color into it,
tying it all together in such a flowing manner. And again, the movement of the hands, that tells it all. That tells it all. Well, Amrita, this was very, very inspiring.
Thank you.
We can't thank you enough for what you have shared with us.
Thank you so much for listening.
For the kindness, for the love, for the insights, and for also a reminder that not everything is in a very linear way. Everything is in movement. Everything has got its own moment. Everything has got its own shape and form.
It's an orchestra.
It's an orchestra within space.
And everything happens for a reason.
Absolutely.
And what I feel the biggest learning I've learned amongst all of this is even when things get really messy and things are not going your way, you understand that everything happens for a reason, and you just have to trust the flow and the process.
Trust the movement.
Perfection.
Trust the movement.
The flow.
Yeah.
This has been Forward Moves, a conversation hosted by Lina Nahhas and Raja Haddad about the successful journey of Amrita Sethi. Thank you again. Our producer was Sai. We recorded at the Podster Studio in Dubai. If you liked our show, leave us a comment and a 5-star rating. If you felt inspired by our show, tell your friends about it. Until then, keep moving forward.